Are y'all ready to learn some forbidden dragon lore? If not, wild choice to click on this video, but I'm glad you're here. Today we're talking about amber dragons, one of the weirdest draconic creatures to ever see the pages of a D&D book. They are intertwined with the forces of nature, they hate metal, and their beak looks like this. Gem dragons have always been the weirdest family of true draconic creatures in D&D, and these guys are no exception. A couple months back, I did a deep dive into obsidian dragons, which as it turns out, are really cool, really smart, and insanely dangerous. They also have some of the most obscure lore in D&D's history, and the amber dragon keeps that trend very much alive by appearing once, ever, and then never showing up again. I don't know what it is about gemstone dragons, but they love to turn up in the strangest places. In the case of the amber dragon, that strange place is the Monstrous Compendium Annual Volume 3. This book, like all other compendiums, is exactly that. A compendium of monsters. In the case of the annual compendiums, it was a big old compilation of all the best creatures from adventures, setting books, and issues of Dragon magazine that had been published in the previous year. Without the modern horrors and conveniences of the internet as it is today, back in the 80s and 90s, these books were extremely useful. It was a great way to keep everything all in one place, get some cool monsters that were part of products you may have missed out on, and there were also always a few new, never before seen creatures added in to spice things up. The only real 5e comparison to this book I can make is Monsters of the Multiverse, which combined Volo's Guide, My Beloved, and Tome of Foes into a single bestiary with some game rule updates, and of course added in the most iconic creature in the 5e retinue, the Dolphin Delighter, a fey creature who telepathically sings the Wellerman in the minds of your ship's crew until they start trending on TikTok. The third annual compendium was published in November 1993, a time Canadian dads everywhere will recall as the last year before the Blue Jays forgot how to play baseball, and a banner year for D&D monsters, it would seem. There are some certified Robin Hood classics in here, but on the short list of new monsters introduced to the D&D player base, there is where we will find the amber dragon. Compared to most other dragons, gem dragons tend to be a bit on the slighter side when it comes to their physicality, and the amber dragon is the smallest and physically the weakest of its kind. I won't repeat every single thing I talked about in the obsidian dragon video because you obviously already watched it, or you're about to after you watch this, right? But the main takeaway here is that gem dragons tend to be less strong, but way smarter and psionically capable. They spend less time at the gym and more time doing nerd shit. And that's where we see the amber dragon's first bit of personality come through, because most of their psionic powers replicate spells and abilities that a druid might have, rather than the more arcane abilities of their brethren. The amber dragon is a cottagecore, plant foraging nature lover through and through. They live in coniferous locales, making themselves at home among ancient trees in deep woodland areas. They can also be found in more open areas, but they prefer the forest, and they definitely don't want to be anywhere near cities or settlements created by other creatures. Now you might think this makes them kind of like druids, or at the very least that they would be sympathetic to druidic causes, but that's not exactly their outlook. Amber dragons don't see themselves as guardians of nature, but rather as an extension of it. They are a force of nature itself, which doesn't exactly put them at odds with druids or other creatures who wish to work on behalf of the natural world, but it's not really the same thing. To them, there is no separation between the natural world and their kind. They're one and the same. And this outlook is reflected by the dragon's mercurial personality. Much like nature itself, they can be calm and collected, gentle even, while other times they can be violent or destructive. I think of them in a way somewhat similar to white dragons, who are by far the most bestial of the standard D&D dragon array, mostly only concerned with their own survival and managing their territory. The big difference being that amber dragons aren't nearly as cruel, and also don't really care about the concept of territory. Sure, they've got lands that they call home, but they're not at all territorial and don't really care who comes and goes through the lands they occupy. That said, if creatures do venture into the forest where they live and they have hostile intent either towards the dragon or towards the land itself, an amber dragon will not hesitate for even a second to kill them where they stand. This also means that when it comes to having a lair, amber dragons are sort of an oddity among their kind. Since they are more or less nomadic, moving from place to place within the area they call home, it's pretty rare for them to actually make a permanent home anywhere. I imagine that this results in there being many burrows or caves that the dragon creates over the years, moving between them at its whims, but most of the time, these places are unlikely to be occupied modified by the dragon itself, though they might provide interesting adventure locales, though we'll get into that later. This also means they don't keep a hoard in the way most dragons do. In fact, they don't care for material wealth at all and have a disdain for all metallic objects. This is something that harkens back to the idea that druids can't wear metal armor or use metal equipment, which is more or less just flavor text in 5th edition, but used to be a very restrictive and real thing. This is where the concept of cold iron used to be a part of the game, which was the idea that you had weapons and equipment that were forged from metal, which is still a natural substance, but weren't processed in a forge, thus making them still part of the natural world, which is why druids could wear cold metal armor or use cold metal weapons specifically to destroy fey creatures because the fey were vulnerable to that. Anyways, just a neat bit of flavor from past editions that doesn't exist anymore, and I think it's kind of cool. So while the dragon itself isn't exactly a druid, it has many of the same ideas about metal cutlery, and this is something that actually manifests in the dragon as a tangible ability. Their scales emit a magnetic field that pushes away metal objects, which makes it difficult for anyone wielding, say, a sword to actually attack them, which is kind of neat and can also serve as a telltale sign that an amber dragon is near, since as they get older, the magnetic field only gets stronger. The other thing that only gets stronger as they age, aside from everything, is their breath weapon, which is super weird. They breathe a massive cone of scalding tree sap that does a good amount of fire damage, but more importantly, restrains the dragon's enemies. If you don't know where amber comes from, this ability might seem kind of insane, but in the real world, amber is literally just fossilized tree sap. So in the world of D&D, amber dragons have sap breath. And unfortunately for their enemies, rather than taking several million years to harden into something nearly identical to a rock, the dragon's sap starts to harden almost immediately, trapping its victims in stasis like a fly in amber. But before we get into the mechanics of how this all works and the other wild stuff this dragon can do, I gotta give a shout out to our friends over at Legend in the Mist and the first bona fide campaign book for their setting, Hearts of Ravensdale. If you're not familiar with Legend in the Mist, you should be, because I talk about them all the time, which means that you have some videos to catch up on. Legend in the Mist is a fantastic TTRPG system with rustic fantasy vibes inspired by folklore and a ton of really amazing monsters and mechanics to match. And as much as I genuinely love the core Legend in the Mist books, I am super stoked about the game's first official expansion, Hearts of Ravensdale. This book has got a beautiful lore-rich setting to explore with tons of fun ideas all dripping with that dark folktale flair. But it's not just a setting book, it's also got new tropes, theme kits, cooking and crafting rules, over 70 new creatures, and 7 adventures that can be played as one-shots or a cohesive campaign if strung together. There are also 2 new magic paths in the Old Ways, which is a path centered around crafting charms, shrines, and performing rituals, as well as one of my personal favorite tropes, Thaumaturgy, which is a secret unlockable path to elevate your use of cultivation magic to the next level. Hearts of Ravensdale is available right now in PDF form, and will be shipping physical copies in June. But if you order a physical copy of the book, you get the PDF right away, which is awesome because there's so much cool stuff in there, and I don't know about you, but I hate waiting for stuff. So whether you're looking to add some more depth to your Legend in the Mist collection, or this is the first you've heard about any of this, I sincerely recommend you check it out. It has quickly become one of my favorite TTRPG systems. So once again, thank you to Legend in the Mist and the Hearts of Ravensdale book for bringing us here to talk about a rustic fantasy monster of our own. Speaking of, let's get back to talking about tree sap. Amber dragons have one of the most interesting breath weapons of any dragon I think I've covered on this channel, and I had a very fun time converting its actual mechanics into 5th edition. Anyone familiar with OSR games will tell you that a lot of abilities in previous editions of D&D, going back to 1st and 2nd edition and all the other games kind of modeled after that ideology, tend to be very vague with how abilities work. There weren't exactly mechanics for every single thing that happens. There are mechanics for how a dragon's breath weapon works, but the idea of you being coated in sap, it will say after a turn, you just kind of get stuck, and it's assumed the dungeon master will understand how to best implement that in their game. You have a lot more leeway, and it's expected the GM's gonna do a lot more of the legwork to make some of this stuff work. This is a philosophy that has strengths and weaknesses, but ultimately, when we're converting these things into 5th edition, you gotta do some considering on how this might actually work in specific game rules, since that is how 5th edition is designed to function. At first brush, I thought it would make sense for this to be more or less a petrification effect, so I look at the way the Medusa's gaze attack works and was planning to have this basically be the Medusa's gaze, but in a big cone, and it turned you into amber instead of stone. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this isn't really the same thing at all. See, when you have the petrified condition, your body literally becomes made of stone. You stop aging, you are no longer conscious, and most importantly, you aren't technically dead. Someone could come along at any time and depetrify you, but that's not really what's happening here. In the case of the breath weapon, a creature that succumbs to it isn't just a cursed stone statue. They are definitely dead. No amount of Jurassic Park fuckery is gonna make that fly trapped in amber start buzzing around again. So instead, I opted for something that is simultaneously a bit more brutal, but also a bit more forgiving in some ways. When the dragon hits with its breath attack, it does some fire damage because the sap is scalding, of course, and you make a dex save. If you pass that save, fantastic. You just take half damage, and if you beef it, well, you take the full amount of damage, and now you have molten amber slowly encasing your entire body. In game terms, that means your ass is restrained. At the end of your next turn, you have to make the save again. And if we were going with the whole petrification thing, if you failed that second save, this is where you would turn to stone. However, instead of that, if you fail the second save here, you will simply become encased in amber. Once you are encased in the dragon's amber, a few things happen. You continue to be restrained, and you've got total cover, which is great, because that means you can't be targeted directly by pretty much anything. You do, however, also start suffocating, which is less good. Rules as written, a creature can hold their breath for a number of minutes equal to 1 plus their constitution modifier, with a minimum of 30 seconds on the clock before suffocation begins. However, there's simply no air to breathe inside of an amber chunk, not to mention that liquid amber itself is threatening to choke the creature, so you just start suffocating right away. If you wanted to be a kind and benevolent DM, you could definitely allow a player to take a deep breath before the amber fully starts choking them out, but either way, once a creature starts suffocating, they will take a level of exhaustion at the end of every turn until they die from it. But all is not lost. The creature inside the amber, or another creature within 5 feet of them, can attempt to make an athletics check to break them out before it fully solidifies, sending chunks of amber flying everywhere. Any levels of exhaustion this creature might have will still linger until they get a chance to rest, but this all felt much more dramatic to me than simple petrification. Saving a buddy from being turned into a fossil or watching the barbarian burst out from an amber prison are moments that I think could be really fun, which is what it's all about. Plus, this has a chance to add a ticking clock to an encounter with the dragon. Maybe it's trying to flee combat or do something else, and the rest of the party has to choose if they want to risk their friend or an important NPC suffocating, or if they want to let the dragon get away. The dragon can also cast a host of spells that really lean into the idea that they're nature guys. They get elementalism, animal friendship, and entangle straight out the egg, adding speak with animals, moonbeam, heat metal, plant growth, and thunder wave as they age. By the time the dragon is an adult, it can cast control weather once per day, and at the ancient category, I gave them good old Storm of Vengeance, which just feels like a fun and thematic spell for them to have. As gem dragons, they of course have psionics, not spells, technically, so these are all flavored as mental powers, and of course that means the dragon can do a psionic version of Misty Step as a bonus action, teleporting 60 feet every turn once they hit the adult age category. The only other oddity beyond the scope of most dragons you'll see on their sheet is the repellent scales trait, which is pretty straightforward. It just imposes disadvantage on all attacks made against them with weapons or ammunition made out of metal on account of the fact that they literally repel these implements away from themselves. So if you want to stab them with a sword, you'd better be pretty damn strong or extremely skilled. I also made sure to retain the dragon's ability to shape change, which is something most metallic and gem dragons can do. However, I did specify that the amber dragons can swap between the shape of a dragon or a beast, mostly because I feel like they would have no desire to change into the shape of a human or an elf. If you want them to be able to shape change into a humanoid creature in your game, ye super can have them do that. It's a dragon. I'm sure they could figure it out, but I like the idea that when they need to be nonchalant, they take on the guise of a beast from the forest rather than a guy. But moving on to matters of storytelling. Amber dragons have tons of really neat story potential that delves into niches not covered by many other draconic creatures, which is great. First and foremost, their relationship with druids is a very fun area of exploration. Say you've got a prominent NPC or a player character in your game who is a druid, and they encounter an amber dragon. There are so many different ways this can go down. The dragon might just straight up be friendly to the druid, seeing in them an ally to nature and hoping to foster some kind of alliance with them. They might be a lot more neutral about the whole thing and basically see the druid as someone doing their own stuff over there, maybe as a potentially helpful force in the forest, but not really as anyone worth connecting to. Or they might be full on hostile towards them, seeing the druid as someone trying to step into the realm of nature when they can't possibly understand the forces they have seemingly dedicated themselves to. All of those are great options, and each one is rife with story potential. If the dragon is friendly towards the druids, maybe they can teach the druids some ancient rites or powerful spells, maybe even give them some knowledge on how to craft powerful druidic magic items. A dragon like this could even be the leader of a druidic circle, passing down ancient druid magic to a new generation of nature-loving guardians. If you want them to be less involved, taking a more neutral stance, this could also be something the dragon is willing to do, but only for those who prove themselves truly worthy. The dragon's outlook on this is likely that they just consider themselves to be a part of nature, and the fact that druids are kind of going out of their way to try and understand nature means they're inherently not part of it, because you shouldn't have to try to understand something that you just are. The dragon might have some kind of test where an aspiring student must prove that they understand fundamentally what being part of nature actually means, and if they can do so, they're rewarded with forgotten knowledge and a cool staff. It could also always be a situation where a druid circle needs help from the dragon, and the dragon wants nothing to do with them. How will the party convince the dragon to help? Or will they not do that and try to find another way to solve the problem? If the dragon is more hostile to those of the druidic persuasion, then it might simply be a straight up antagonizing force the party has to deal with. Not necessarily an evil one, but just a potentially very destructive creature that could get in their way if they venture too deep into the forest. And it would be such a shame if a plot relevant location or object just so happened to be in that forest, wouldn't it? I also love the idea that these guys leave behind burrows as they wander. The burrow of an adult or ancient amber dragon could make a really cool adventure location even if the dragon isn't there. Just the idea that you're wandering through tunnels created by one of these draconic creatures, and that those tunnels are now occupied by some other creatures in the dragon's absence is pretty cool. There's also something to be said for the idea that this dragon might actually just establish a lair. I mean, sure, lore is written, they don't really do that, but maybe in your world, they do. In my conversion document, I did include their lair features just in case some of you decide that that's something you want to do, and honestly, I think there are ways to do that which even makes sense with the dragon's existing lore. Because at the end of the day, if it does have a lair, and a hoard even, you just have to ask yourself why that's true. Maybe the dragon's territory has been shrinking over time due to humanoid settlements encroaching on the forest, and now it's decided that it's gonna stay and remain watchful over a specific part of the forest to make sure nobody else does any harm to it. Or perhaps the dragon is simply so ancient that it's tired of wandering and simply established a place to call home. In either case, or in the event of whatever you come up with, what do we think the dragon would actually hoard in said lair? I like the idea that this dragon might be hoarding something akin to a giant greenhouse where it's got all kinds of plants that it tends to in a massive garden. And maybe this place is the only location known that a certain rare species of plant grows, and the players need that plant for a story reason, either to resurrect someone, lift a curse, or do something else. Then it becomes a whole thing of trading for it, doing a quest for the dragon, or stealing it from the garden, all of which could be very fun. If you ever want to make sure that your party never trusts you again, there is also something incredibly nefarious you can do with this dragon that will make a mimic encounter look like child's play. See, I think it stands to reason that amber dragons may enjoy wandering through their forest in the form of an animal from time to time, and if the group of adventurers just so happens to be traveling through that forest, there's a good chance that when the night falls, our ranger is gonna go off and do what they do best, gather some food. So the ranger, or whoever, goes into the forest and rolls some survival checks to track down dinner. Maybe they find a wild boar, or a stag, or a wombat. But whatever the case, they take aim, loose their shot, and sure enough, pierce the creature's hide, only for it to transform into a dragon and turn the tables on them. Bonus points if the shot misses because of the dragon's AC, and the fact that their repellent scales trait would still be active even when they're in a different shape, and the party decides that they have to hunt this wild special animal because it's obviously magical, right? You saw the way that arrow veered off into the tree. Overall, I think amber dragons are extremely fun and make a great addition to the repertoire of true dragons we have available to us. So as always, if you want to use this creature in your campaign, linked in the description down below is a Google document which contains all the information, both game stats and lore stuff, which you will need to run this creature successfully at your game table for each age category for free. And if you are one of my lovely patrons over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the high-res PDF stat block, which contains all the same game information, but is presented in a more fanciful way as my way of saying thank you to the folks over there who throw me some extra support each month and help make this show possible. Speaking of which, it's time for Patron of the Week, and thank you so much to Gabagool Guy for all the support. It's Gabba good to know I can count on you. And thank you for watching. As always, if there's a monster you'd like to see in a future episode of Monster of the Week, let me know in the comments down below or over on the Dungeon Dad Discord in the Monster Suggestions chat, and who knows, I might just see it show up in a future episode of Monster of the Week. I had a ton of fun converting this creature, and I think that they're really weird and cool, which is always a bonus, and this will now be the second gem dragon added into our list of forgotten gem dragons, so next dragon we do will probably be another gem dragon. I think there are still 2 that we have to do, maybe 3. I don't have my computer in front of me because I'm making a video, but yeah. Regardless, the next one will be a gem dragon, so let me know which of the remaining gem dragons you would like to see if you are aware of what the missing ones are, or if you want to go and do some research of your own. Either way, I've been having a ton of fun bringing these gem dragons back into 5e, and I look forward to doing the rest of them. So one last time, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Till then.